real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. All right. I'm your host, Nathan Romas. My guest today is Sergeant Ryan Ferry of the Edmonton Police Service Gang Suppression Team. Sergeant Ryan Ferry is in his 17th year with the Edmonton Police Service. He has worked in several positions, including patrol, White Avenue Beats, Public Safety Compliance Team, and the Hospitality Policing Unit. Also, he worked as a detective in Downtown Division and supervised the Crime Management Team, and now the Gang Suppression Team. Then in his spare time, because he's got so much of it, Sergeant Ferry also presents several internal and external courses. As well, he co-teaches a university course on the history of gangs and effective gang intervention strategies. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
So, for full disclosure, Ferry is my current supervisor. This is not why he's one of the first episodes, but it's just the way the timing of when I schedule people in. He was the most readily available. So, he's one of the first. So
by default, yes.
Yes, by default. So let us start at the beginning. Tell everybody about Baby Ferry.
Baby Ferry. I appreciate the platform. I think that this is a unique way to reach people, and if people can kind of understand where we come from and why we do this job, then hopefully they'll kind of get a lens or a view into what it is we're doing here and why we do what we do and what the desired outcomes are. And maybe if people are able to kind of humanize us and we can humanize ourselves to people, we can maybe reach our common goals a little bit better. So for me, where to begin, right? I was a pretty typical kid. I'll say it for the viewers right now, and we don't have any video, but currently I'm 44 years old. I'm a white male. I have Irish and Scandinavian roots. I am quite certainly from the significantly lower middle class, as a result of a bunch of different family dynamics. So I was born and raised originally in Edmonton, which is where we happen to be policing from. And then my father worked in the oil patch and had engineering background and civil engineering background and oil fields and sales. And he ended up starting a company related to oil and gas, and we moved from Edmonton into the small town of Devon. And I spent my early formative years in Devon from the time I was, I think, seven or eight until my parents split in my early teen years. And so my formative years are in this idyllic little suburb, just kind of to the southwest of the major city. I could ride my bike throughout the town, and all of my friend group were within a 10-block radius, and we would play until the sun went down, and oftentimes beyond that. You get the typical mom yelling out the front steps, "Jamie, dinner!" and that would be the dinner bell for everybody to start going. And then my life changed quite drastically. I have a younger sibling as well. I have a younger brother who's 7 years younger than me, and I have an older half brother from my pop's first marriage. And so the older brother was really ostensibly out of our lives because of the divorce and a whole bunch of other kind of family dynamics. And when mom and dad split, it was due to a bunch of and in parlance, apropos of today's sort of awareness. There's a bunch of trauma informed or trauma affected or trauma influenced actions and events that happened to my father, and he carried them on with him into parenthood and adulthood. And so he was a long-term addict. He was a drinker. He was an alcoholic. He suffered significant emotional and physical abuse at the hands of his alcoholic parents. So it's generational for sure. And so there was a confluence of factors that happened to my pops right around that time. I was entering into teenhood, where he lost a business, lost his parents to illness. He had a friend commit suicide. So there was just this trifecta, this perfect storm where his life just hit a giant shitstorm, and then that related to our life then being a giant shitstorm. So they separated and divorced, and we moved into the city where I lived primarily with my mom for the remainder of my teenage years, and Dad was in and out. He'd be on the wagon, back in our lives, and we'd be okay, and then whatever would come up for him, and he'd be back on the bottle, and he'd be out for months to years. So in growing up, I moved from this school where the entire town's elementary school population was at one school. And the prospect of moving on to high school was, well, that's the one and only high school that you go to, and you earn these social relationships. We go to the south side of town, and I find myself plunged into Mill Woods, and I essentially become a latchkey kid because mom's got to work and dad's kind of in and out. So I make some really, really fortunate friendships with some relatively normal dudes in my junior high experience. They kind of take me under their wing, and I was essentially kind of de facto adopted by a couple of different families, it was amazing how some of those social relationships shaped my future, like high school choices and stuff like that. My parents did the best they could. My dad was full of his own demons, but he never ever brought his turmoil and his conflict in terms of like anger and violence or anything. Like none of that was directed towards the kids or mom. He had a monster chain down in the basement, and that anger was always kind of there, and so you were aware of it. And the quintessential like, kid scared of dad. Kid's not scared of dad because dad's gonna haul off and wail on him, but dad might come unhinged, and you could see that kind of anger. So whether or not that kind of formed part of my early worldview of fatherhood or masculinity or adulthood, I'm not educated enough to kind of self-diagnose, but because I had friends in these communities, my future was really up in the air, and my parents did the best they could, but weren't really able to stay on top of my social circle, my school exploits. I was a smart kid. Junior high, I won like awards for French language, and I was in the top probably 80th percentile for like math and STEM fields and stuff like that. I was doing great academically and athletically and socially, so I was kind of hands off. And then when it came time to select a school going forward, I didn't talk to my parents about where I was going to go to high school. I just looked at my friends and said, "Hey, where are you going?" And I wanted to play football. I knew I wanted to play football. I was a big football fan. I grew up playing hockey and stuff like that, but I thought football was going to be my pursuit. And so in the area where we lived, J. Percy Page didn't have a football program. I wasn't going to go to the Catholic school. Bonnie Doon was not an option. Wagner was a technical school for kids that are academically challenged, and so McNally was the closest place that had a great football program. So I said, I'm going to McNally, and I informed my family afterwards, and I only had 2 or 3 friends that were going from my school up into McNally, and so we were in Mill Woods. I bussed it to McNally every single day, and that really shaped my high school experience, because I had tremendous respect and contact with some incredible faculty there. They they really did a good job of. It is a relatively small school in the context of Edmonton-based high schools. Most of the high schools are in the thousands of students, mid-thousand to higher thousands. So like Harry Ainley would have 2,500 kids or whatever, and McNally had sub 1,000. We were in the 900 range, so it was a relatively small school, and I had a great experience with all my phys ed experiences. I almost flunked out of grade 10. Busing to school was challenging to me, and I skipped a lot of classes because I was smart enough where I was usually able to get away with never doing homework. I really great reading retention and really horrible self-discipline when it comes to doing the work in behind the scenes.
So you lost the 5% attendance mark?
I
remember that in high school.
The special thanks for showing up. I found myself plummeting from the 80s and 90s and down to like the 50s in some of the subjects. I legitimately had a pillow and a blanket in a spare locker at school, and I would go and skip class and kind of hang out. So I was on the precipice of being one of the dropout losers, and I had some friends that would facilitate that. They're just good time guys and smoking dope and getting drunk a whole bunch. I don't have any one particular person that I can point to that kind of pulled me out of it, but I can say that my experiences on the student athlete side kind of helped me gain some purpose and be like, oh, okay, I gotta stop messing around. So he's famous in Edmonton coaching circles, Jim Gilfillan. They named an entire football conference after him. He was teaching for, I don't know, 900 years. Jim Gilfillan was one of my early social teachers. A bunch of the coaches really looked out for me. I don't know if they had a conversation ahead of time and said, hey, this kid's coming off the rails, but he's a good kid or whatever. So in my high school experience, I had really honestly a great time. So I ended up falling into rugby, and that was a secondary passion, and I had a great time. I was the captain of the football team, captain of the rugby team. I returned for a second high school year, and I always kind of had ambitions to pursue higher level athletics, but it was never guided by any sort of like real vision or understanding of how to translate early success towards any sort of like later pursuits. I had no idea about university. I knew you could get scholarships, or you could kind of pursue athletics in a broader stage, but I didn't really have a plan. So I attended some football camps and some scouting pieces, but all of my efforts had been a little bit too little too late. I had some offers from some universities, Eastern Canada, and I had a friend. I had a crush on her. She ended up being the person I dated and later married. We were friends, and our families became friends. She kind of helped me navigate the academic side, but even then, I didn't really have a plan per se. Mm-hmm. So I ended up thinking, you know what? If I'm gonna go to school, I think I had a great time with my teachers, my coaches. So I thought a career plan would be in teaching. So I applied to U of A, and I got into U of A after I had taken a year off. And throughout all that time, I look back on kind of my experiences. I held a job from the time I think my first job was 14, and I was part-time employed throughout my childhood and throughout the teen years. I worked as a busboy. I worked at gas stations. I worked at fast food places. I worked at A&W for 2.5 weeks. I had a variety of experiences. My dad was in and out of our lives. It was an interesting time in that I would financially contribute to my family, and Dad would sometimes he's passed now, so I can kind of speak about him candidly, but he would hit me up for money I remember being 14, 15 years old, trying to save up for something, or take a girl on a date or something like that, and then Dad would come and clean me out and be like, "Hey, I'm short this month. Can you help?" And the $300 that I had saved were going towards the heat bill or whatever. So it was a really unpredictable time. I think the most telling stat out of my childhood was about my future kind of, not instability, but my future kind of experiences, and how my childhood shaped kind of my perception is when I made the police application. I lived in 21 homes in 24 years. So with Mom, we'd move, we'd do another rental, we'd move midway through the year. Dad would come, we'd get evicted. Like, there was a lot of instability there. So
this was all within Edmonton?
This is all within Edmonton, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot, and so it wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it was just normal. That's the normal I grew up in, and we'd move twice, sometimes 3 times in a year. So there was a lot of change, and there was a lot of just adapting, I guess, is kind of what my experience was. So then I did a year at University of Alberta, and I had great experiences there. It was a really good time. I was a football player. I got selected for. I made the senior cut for the football team, and this was, I think it was '96. I got selected at the very same time for the Canadian under 19 men's national team for rugby, and the only reason I ended up making that team was because a coach here in Alberta, Kirby White, recognized that, hey, this kid's actually pretty good at this sport. You should maybe come out to this team and this tryout. And I had some really, really great experiences through, again, athletics, through the Druids rugby program that operates out of Sherwood Park, that is essentially responsible for delivering coaching at a high school level too. I had incredibly lucky encounters with people that were invested, that were giving of their time and their expertise and their understanding and modeling. So through a series of universe-bending coincidences, I ended up getting selected for this under-19 tour to Wales, and I skipped out on school. I was like, hey, I'm gonna give this a shot. I had no experience in terms of national or international rugby, in terms of measuring myself against what an elite level kind of competition would be. I had the guys that were local. I did really well here in town, but Edmonton isn't a hotbed of international rugby either. So
no, it is not.
No, it's tough to really kind of gauge yourself. So I went over and we got just shellacked by the teams over in the UK. But it was a great experience, and a lot of the guys I ended up playing with went on to play national team and professional rugby. So I had such a great experience with that, and part of why I bring that up is because football was my first real love in terms of pursuit and sport. But my lack of discipline and my inability to, I was a practice demon. I would practice with the team and lead the team and do all those things. If it was practice time, I was there 100% dedicated, committed. But when it came to the off season and it came time to working on myself and having any semblance of like, here's a workout plan and here's what you should be following, it went right out the window. There was zero consistency in my life, and I had zero self-discipline that I imposed on myself. So trying to play football as a middle linebacker at 195 pounds, I was undersized. I had the brains for it, and I had a really, really, really great experience with some of the coaches, and they tried to get me in that direction, but I was, in retrospect, I was undersized, and I would have gotten there had I stuck with it. But here's this national team program on the rugby side where I was also doing really, really well, and it wasn't an easier path. It was just it was a path where I was getting that immediate success. Excuse me. So I ended up giving rugby a shot, and I remember I had a coach, Mr. McIntyre. He looked at me. He was my high school coach, and he went on to be the University of Alberta. A bunch of my coaches went on to coach at the U of A. And he looked at me. He said, "Just promise me one thing, man. Just promise me you're not going to be one of those rugby bums." And I remember that sticking with me because a bunch of the guys from McNally had gone on to play on the West Coast and have a great time. And they were 30, 35, 40 years old, working at restaurants, playing rugby, touring Western Canada, just being burnout drunks and not really aspiring to a whole lot. So that kind of stuck in my mind. I did the first year at U of A, and it wasn't really doing it for me. I was still at home. I was still kind of participating in the weird dance that my parents were doing. So on a whim, I reached out to University of Victoria, and I reached out to the coach there, and I said, "Hey, this is who I am. I'm interested in maybe coming out in a." So I reached out to him in the summer of '99, right after I finished my first year at U of A, and I was thinking about like the 2001 year, not the 99 2000. I was thinking, what. Is there an appetite for having me come out, and how could I blaze a path towards getting out there? And he came back and must have done some checking on me, and he said, "Well, why don't you come out now? I can get you, and your grades are good enough. I can get you into school now. We'll get you whatever program you want. Just come and play rugby now." And I think I had 5 weeks before the start of school, or 6 weeks before the start of school year. And it was a spur of the moment.
It's like they do with some of the recruits, right? They call you up and they're like, you got a week to get here.
You have a space now. The job is yours, and get your ass in gear. So I really had nothing tying me here. I was dating at the time, and I had no other prospects beyond. I think I want to give this athletics thing a shot. So I went. I got into the program that I wanted. I got the classes that I wanted, and he put me on the list. And I remember showing up for my first week of, honestly, the first week of school, I got situated with, we had distant family friends that were willing to put me up. They had a son my age somewhere else, and so they had room in their house. And it was a horrible experience. They lived like an hour and a half bus ride away, and they were wonderful people, but they were on the island, and they were really not accommodating to like, it was just a weird, bizarre experience. They opened up their home to me, but I was limited in being able to come and go, and they monitored my phone calls and my garbage output.
So they treated you like one of their own, but they had just excessive rules.
It was weird. Yeah, it was a weird, like, I'm an adult now, and I'm a university student. I'm a teenager living in an adult body. Ridiculous decision making, for sure. I don't have any money, and it was not a great fit. So I ended up midway through the first semester, I ended up crashing on a buddy's couch. He played for one of the rugby teams out there, and he's like, "Yeah, man, just come and hang out." So I ended up getting a place like a block and a half away from campus, and I lived the rugby bum life. I did well enough in all my classes, and I had a great time out there. I spent 4 years out there, and I had a great time. You should be able to finish a degree in 4 years, but not this guy. I lived the Van Wilder life. I took a reduced class load. I was still full-time, but I took a reduced class load, and I worked throughout that time. I was a bouncer at a couple of local clubs, the university bar and a club downtown, and I took to it. I had originally got a little bit of experience as a 19-year-old here in Edmonton. I got my first bouncing job before I left town, and that matched up and married my demands of like school and academic and athletic balance. And in the summer times, I worked at the kids camps put on by the university. So I was up at I can't tell you, like 7 in the morning. So I worked all night until 4 in the morning, telling other human beings what to do, and then I'd blast home, get a couple hours sleep, and then zombie my way into campus. And I would watch kids as early as like 7:30 in the morning, I think it was, and then we do kids camps, sports camps all day in the summer sun, and then I'd get a little bit of a nap in the afternoon, and then back to work that night between that and practice.
Like I said, you've had a lot of free time your whole entire life, right?
It doesn't exist. We worked hard, and that's one thing. I look at my dad, and he was a worker. And he was if I reflect on him, he was a workaholic too, alcoholic, workaholic. Lived at work and lived through his work. He was a good father, and he loved his kids. You could tell he gave a shit, but he couldn't put down that work side of things, and he didn't have a whole lot of balance. So maybe that rubbed off. I hope some of the good stuff rubbed off, and I'm able to kind of be responsible in my own life and not live it that much. But yeah, it's been a trend for me and my upbringing. So throughout my time on the coast, I had always intended to do something around athletics, probably coaching. There was a prospect of doing some professional sports. And I had really great experiences with cops out there. And I can't remember his name. I think his name was Gil out there. He was working for Victoria PD. He was the first real person that suggested policing as a career opportunity. He tried to campaign for me to leave school early, in fact, and said, "What are you doing with yourself after this? So after you're done school, or come down right now, apply."
Up until this point, though, you'd never thought about policing, or is it something crossed your path?
Yeah, I think policing was always kind of this, in my mind, maybe a possibility, kind of cool. Oh, I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old, I was at a school, my younger brother's school, and the tactical team had come in to do like some sort of demonstration at his school. And I thought, man, those guys are cool. And there was a general sense of uniform kind of service jobs as a cool career, like some sort of like military or fire. I at one point thought maybe I'll be a fighter pilot or something like. I don't know if it was influenced by Top Gun, but that was always a general sentiment. But it was never like I'm going to do this as a career option and seriously look into it. So when Gil mentioned that to me, I don't know if he's still working on the job or not, but I seriously considered it, and I thought, that could be really fantastic. And I think the clincher for me, the kind of what brought me back to Edmonton was my now ex. She was really, really connected to family here in Edmonton, and her dad had a heart attack, and we couldn't get off the island. She hated being there. There was a lot of dynamic and stuff that kind of, you reflect on it now. Oh, you were miserable. You didn't like there for a variety of reasons, but that's why we're exes. So she hated it out there, and what kind of the straw that broke the camel's back in that sense of regard was her dad had a heart attack back here in town, and we couldn't get off the island. There was no flights leaving that night. So he could have died, and she would have been stuck with me and all these stupid people from Victoria and the stupid Victoria. Like, it wasn't happening. And I think it cost us $800 to fly out the next day last minute. Each. It was criminal. And so she was like, you know what, I can't do this. So she moved back here, which means I moved back here. I transferred back to U of A. And I was going to still pursue teaching. So I got into there's a combined program. It's a 5-year condensed phys ed double degree program. I did my first year of the ed part, and I hated it. Just the sense of who would be my peers. I didn't feel like I fit in with them. I give all the credit in the world to teachers. It is a very hard profession.
You're more you'd be the more the hands-on type to learn something, right? You're talking like academic versus
very much so. Being
out there in the field.
In theory, and my experiences with summer camps and childhood education and early childhood stuff. Like, I had a bunch of different experiences with kids. I knew I was good with kids. But the structure of teaching to a specific curriculum and looking at the prospects of that as a career just didn't sit right with me at all. And so I think I originally applied in 2003 2003, 2004 to the EPS. I had great experiences again with the cops, great experiences with the security kind of aspect. And so I applied. I remember walking into the recruiting office downtown in a shorts and a t-shirt or something and asking about that. I had no sense of regard for maybe present yourself as a professional, as a potential recruit candidate. And so the guy looked at me and said, well, here's an info package, you dummy. And then I got informed that I wasn't 3 years clear of what the minimum requirements were at the time for criminal activity. So a collection of idiotic college age hijinks plagued me for a very short period of time. So me and my idiot friends had stolen a 6-foot-long stuffed bull from a grocery store in Victoria. I was
going to say, that sounds like something right out of Van Wilder.
It was 100%. So the genesis of that, the nexus of that was...
You're not still a suspect for this, though.
I have since returned all items, and that was a condition of my hiring with EPS, was to make amends with the places that I had wronged and commit some donations and take responsibility for some of my actions. So yeah, 100%. I was having a conversation with a group of the guys because I had worked at a retail job. It was a sport check, and we had a loss prevention officer come and give a discussion on theft and how easy it was to miss people who are professional thieves. And they showed us a video of a guy walking out the front doors during the $99 ski sale. So it's pandemonium inside the store. $900 ski boots are going for $99 and skis and whatever else. This guy came in and brought a grubby old pair of shoes, tried on some of these super elite mega downhill ski racing boots or whatever it was, and then threw his grubby shoes into the ski boot box and then clumped right out the front door. And the cashier was like, bye, have a nice day. And he walked right out of this place with $1,000 on his feet. And so I was telling that story to the guys at I can't remember, somebody's house in Victoria, and they said, bullshit. I said, no, guys, I'm telling you, I could probably steal something right in front of everybody, and they wouldn't notice. So the Buddy the Bull, from the meats department at whatever grocery store around the corner from my buddy's place, they said, yeah, this is ridiculous. You're making it up. I said, no, I could walk out of here with that bull under my arm and just act like I belonged, and they wouldn't even notice. So I did just that. I walked right out the door, and nobody stopped me. So we stole a 6-foot-tall gumball machine from a Subway restaurant and a box of focaccia bread from a local coffee house from right at the front counter. Juvenile, idiotic things, nothing criminal mastermindy, but I wasn't clear of any of that behavior to put in my application. So that was early on in my university experience. And so 2005, I put in, the next opportunity was 6 months later, still within 2004. I put in for the job, and I was deferred. I was deferred for 3 years because my recruiter probably thought I was an idiot, and maybe juvenile or maybe not mature enough or anything. I was 27 at the time. I got married, and we didn't have kids yet. I got deferred for 3 years, and that was a pretty big blow to the ego and to the kind of the sense of, well, what now? And I considered, I talked to my family, and we had considered, what are the options here? You get a 3-year deferral, and that's a long time. I had decided that once my mind was made up on the career path, I needed to figure out where I was going to do that. And so policing was going to be it for me. And I remember considering fire. And then people at the time who had seen me and had known me growing up, and apparently I'm good with people, and I'm a bit of a storyteller, and I've had some luck in getting compliance in crazy situations. It has suited me well. And I was considering fire, and then somebody said, Ferry, you can't convince a fire to just settle down and stop. You can't talk your way into or out of a fight with a fire. It is what it is. And so I do better with people. And I think that's the right call. When you boil it down, I do better with people. The physical stuff is fine and I'm capable of it, but the people are who I connect with. And so.
So at that time, what did the application process kind of involve, or what did it look like back in
so in 04, I think the application package was 72 pages all in. It was something you printed off of the website. I think you can go into the recruiting office and get an application process or package. And it was a bunch of pre-lined, pre-written, printed forms. And it was, tell us about everything bad you've ever done in your entire life and why.
So this is the personal disclosure
that they the PDF,
still do to this day.
Correct.
Tell us everything.
Tell us everything. And so
it's a pretty intimidating package. When you're looking at that, it was
something that I wasn't prepared for. I thought generally it was going to be fairly intrusive, but I had no realization for what it went into: your financial history, sexual history, criminal associations, your living situations, 24 houses in 21 years, or 21 houses in 24 years. Everything. And what surprised me was, give us the dates and the reasons for why you did all this. And that blew me away.
You had to do that for the 21 addresses?
Correct. So I came back with 21 addresses, and this is where I lived. And I found myself driving around town. I was lucky to have kept some correspondence in my Victoria time. I had some residences there as well, couch surfing and whatnot. But it really didn't paint a flattering picture of me. And so I was pretty grateful, actually, for the ability to explain myself. The recruiter that I ended up having, who ended up deferring me, I found out after the fact he went on to be the boss of our professional standards branch and some other places. He ended up quitting in controversy because he had done some inappropriate things on the job. And so that was a little bit of a coup and a victory for myself. I was kind of actually satisfied to hear that. So I got deferred. This package was handwritten, and I didn't make a copy of it before handing it in. So so you get these questions like, "Hey, tell me about this thing." And I remember I wrote, "What? Wait," and I would need a second to kind of. So I looked unprepared and unprofessional is what it ultimately came across as. So I remember thinking about, what my career path was going to be, and policing was definitely going to be it, and where am I going to do policing? So I considered other municipal forces, so Calgary, Vancouver, back to Victoria. The RCMP were last on my list. And I think what generally formed that kind of assessment on my behalf was the likelihood of moving and the potential for being able to be moved anywhere across the country. It didn't really appeal to me. I think municipal policing, city policing, urban policing was going to be in the cards for me. It just depended on where I was going to go. So nothing against the RCMP. It wasn't a favorable sort of organization for me in my prospects at the time. So I essentially said, fuck it, I'm going to get on with Edmonton, whether it come hell or high water, that's going to be it for me. And so I ended up deciding to go back to school, finish my degree. So I got a degree in physical education. Essentially, it's now been converted to a bachelor in kinesiology. Mm-hmm. That's what my degree equivalent is. And in order to complete the degree at the time at the University of Alberta, you had to do a practicum. So some practicums are with like city-run fitness facilities or whatever. And I happened to be going through this, pardon me, I remember this legal-sized box full of file folders of files of potential practicums, and I pull one out that says Edmonton Police Service, and it was with the fitness unit. So it was working for the city of Edmonton for the Edmonton Police Service as a basically an assistant to who at the time was Dr. David Wilds. Dr. Dave Wilds was legendary within the police service. They called him Dr. Death because he was so hard on recruit classes, but he maintained some pretty significant policies in terms of the testing standards to get on with the EPS. So there was men's and women's fitness standards, and they were proportionally very, very hard. And we could get into like gender performance under physical tests and stuff like that. But for men and women, those test standards were really, really high. And the workout facilities and stuff like that within the EPS, while not given time on the job to work out, there was a culture of fitness. And so the practicum was basically being his lackey and entering data into his computer. And I remember saying, well, I'm going to go and get my practicum there. So I went and interviewed with Dave Wiles, and he hired me essentially on the spot. We had a great experience. He was such a gruff, but wonderfully warm-hearted man. I'm a bigger dude. I'm 6'2", and at that time I was running about 220, 225, and his affectionate name for me was Bucket Ass. Here comes old Bucket Ass. You got to turn sideways to get in the door, don't you?
Just think if you said that nowadays.
I don't think it would be as well received, and at the time, it was hilarious to me. But I had never been subjected to forms of sort of like discrimination or something like that. So I don't know if he reserved that for just guys like me who had a different experience. But I owe that guy my career, because then I got to work in the police service, and people saw that I wasn't a child. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't a dummy. I had a history, and I had to be accountable for that history. But I made a lot of professional, deep-seated connections with people within the police service. So I'm fortunate. Certainly, I'm fortunate. I got that job as a practicum on my own merits, with my own smarts, and with my own experience, and with my own history that I had carved out. I was a decent student by that time. I was doing all my homework, and I think I warranted the selection. But after that, I got my foot in the door, and people were able to kind of assess my character. And so I was granted an opportunity to reapply with the police service with a different file manager, and they hired me. So my 3-year deferral was up in a year, basically. I got on. I did a couple of different kind of interview processes, and I entered into class in 2005, September of 2005. And class experience was different for me, because I had helped train recruit classes, and I had kind of seen behind the curtain. And so the training staff, I was working beside them a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, and then here I am as a subordinate in a completely different power dynamic, and they made it very clear to me that they were going to make an example out of me. Like, nobody gets favorable attention or favorable sort of like an easy ride, because wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you're part of the, no, like, you better be first in line and last guy out of the room and putting in the most effort, because nobody can be seen to be giving you like an easy ride. So that was my class experience. We had 55 people. I was class 107. I would do it again. We had a charmed group where we surmounted some of those obstacles that are put in your way. You know, the whole entire group has to, unite together against the evil training staff that are making your life difficult, and you unite together against figuring out how to shine your boots or not forget your gun on Firearms Day or whatever it became. We rallied and supported each other and had a great time. We had people from all walks of life in our midst, and we all gelled really well together. After I got through recruit class, thinking about career prospects as soon as you get in, I'm a dude that comes from high-level athletics. I think my career prospects, in my mind, were canine or tactical. That was the two directions that I was thinking of heading right out of the gate. And
I think that's like a lot of people think that is their first kind of go-to. That's what used to be on all the recruiting posters. That's what I
100%.
remember.
Yeah, that's
you had
what-
the chopper swooping in, dogs are going crazy, and everybody's got like all the cool gear and stuff. So I think that's what used to be
I think
recruiting
Yeah, I
strategy.
think that was a major part of the recruiting strategy was and I think it fits, honestly. You take a bunch of people who are student athletes, or they have this history of pursuing something greater than themselves, and they watch movies and think this is what's popular in pop culture and stuff, and that's the clearest path to catch bad guys and playing cops and robbers and whatever else.
I think when I was coming through class, like that was my kind of frame of reference. I watched all the Die Hard movies and Lethal Weapon, and then I'm like, oh, that's what they do. And then pretty sure I was the one who said at class there is like, yeah, I signed up to like give out the hugs and kisses. It's more for the violence. I want to drive fast cars and all those fun things.
It was pretty clear path for me. I relate, and I know I exhaust you guys and just about everybody that knows me. My life is referenced in movies and movie quotes, and yeah, like in this movie, this guy did this, blah blah blah. My worldview was kind of framed around. So part of it's my dad. Despite all the drinking and the instability and a whole bunch of other stuff, he had a real sense of good and evil, right and wrong. We're not bad guys. We work hard. We're honest. And he celebrated some of my athletic heroes. The sense of collective, head down, work hard. True blue hero stuff that kind of shaded my early kind of perception of what it was to kind of be the good guys. And then, yeah, my movie consumption, whatever else, kind of shaped that. So I got onto a squad on the south side, and that brings me into my patrol time. And what was really kind of, again, the universe was working in my favor and put me into a squad with a friend of mine from high school who had gone on 6 months earlier from me. He was from class 106. And then another guy that I helped train his class from class 105, and a couple from 104. So there was a big clump of us together that all knew each other. We were on really good terms. And my boss at the time just stuck us in a car and said, "Go raise hell."
This would be like 2006
This is
now?
2006.
Okay.
Correct. So in 2006, we hit the road, and they just stuffed us in a car. After I got signed off, my block 2, where you go out and essentially you're riding with a we call them FTO at the time, and then the PTO class came in, and that's your police training officer, and there's a whole bunch of documentation as to adult learning based sort of objectives and outcomes in terms of teaching people how to do this job. I had a 26-year at the time. She was 26 years on. Arlene is still up taking calls. She's the longest serving female police officer in Canada. She was not part of I Want to Be Tactical. She was not part of any of that culture. And so she taught me a lot of things about policing that I will have since forgotten. She had a lot of experience in domestic violence and a bunch of family calls and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I had a good mix. Bunch of the guys that I ended up in a squad in either went to dogs or tactical. I have both of those at the roots in my squad, but I also have long-standing kind of community policing gurus in my midst as well. So that really kind of helped shape me. In my secondary PTO, Jamie, he gave out, that guy, he did undercover work, he did long-term gang projects and a bunch of other stuff. He gave out his card so often that I think he cost the service and the division the most in terms of like card printing budget, because he just wanted to talk to everybody. Hey, if you got a problem, here's my card. Hey, call me, here's my card. And that guy had generated a ton of sources.
You must have taught somebody else on our team.
Must have.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yep. Here's my card. And so
So now you're in Patrol Southwest.
Patrol South, actually, this was
South,
this
sorry.
was the entire south side of the city. So the way it works is the whole rest of the city got chopped up into divisions. Basically, it was geographic division based. The population density per cop for the rest of the city was about 500 to 1. You have one cop for every 500 residents. In the south side of Edmonton, because it was so vast and growing so rapidly, we had one cop for every 2,500 residents. We would show up for work and there'd be 25, 30, 35 calls on the board. We were just blasting around with our hair on fire, trying to just keep a lid on the south side of town. And that's right when there was a ton of growth on the south side, intermixed with lower income. Like it was just a lot of. It was a bubbling cauldron, I'd say, and it was in that time, in my first couple of years, that I was able to kind of get a sense of gang work. I had a partner at the time, the guy I went to high school with. He had an unbelievable knack. I call it speaking bad guy. He would be able to show up to a call with literal killers and murderers and just talk to them, and they had this weird. He had this weird effect on bad guys, where they would just somehow relate to him and want to sit down and talk and be calm and just be cool. And so Mike is his name. Mike and I used to just tear through the south side, and we started picking off gangsters. And we'd figure out where they live and what they drive and look for them and stop them constantly and try and figure out what they were up to and try and bust these huge investigations wide open from a dumb patrol constable kind of perspective. And I had good experiences with a number of people, and I think my time as the fitness guy kind of opened some doors for me in terms of gave me some credibility with a bunch of older, more well-established cops that would otherwise hey, I don't know you, man. Go and finish your B&E report. Mm-hmm. I'd be on at least socially, I'd be able to talk to them about, hey, how'd you do this, or who's this guy? So I was able to kind of feed that desire to dig and learn more. So it became kind of apparent early on, excuse me, that tactical, while still being an interest of mine, was becoming less attractive in relation or in the face of what gang work was. And then K9 actually, I had a bunch of friends who dedicated their lives to that, and I was disinterested with the quarrying hours. So for listeners, quarrying is essentially giving your own time and donating it to the functioning of the unit. So you would be there helping, I don't know, wash their cars or train puppies or be present at the kennels to put in a bunch of time and volunteer hours, basically. It was put towards good use, and the functioning of the unit would be incomparably compromised, I guess, if that's a term.
Yeah. They wouldn't be able to function if they didn't have these volunteers.
They couldn't. But the quarry hours that you put in also were put in to the formula for making you a competitive candidate. And I couldn't wrap my head around donating that many hours to something that I wasn't accepted to, and I wasn't going to have a guarantee in pursuing as a career. So I valued home life a little bit too much to risk it on something that I might not be able to pursue ultimately. It wasn't in my hands. And I could get on a tangent about not having control about that application process. Invariably, I have found that your ability to speak to who you are and your character has been remarkably easy for me. I thought, for example, I thought that behavior and the personal disclosure form was going to be hard. You just get up and tell the truth. You just talk about yourself and tell the truth, and it's a breeze. I thought the polygraph was going to be hard. I was really worried about the lie detector test. I thought, what if the guy doesn't like me, or what if is the easiest test I've ever taken. Just tell the truth, and you don't have to worry about anything. It was a breeze. is absolutely a breeze. And so that theme kind of followed me throughout my career. I went in front of people and said, well, this is what I'm all about, and this is what I've pursued, and here's me in my entirety, and it's served me well because I believe I've acted with integrity and honor and hard work.
So with that, you've served in a bunch of roles in addition to like patrol's kind of where, for everybody that is listening, patrol is now where you kind of learn your bread and butter, learn how to be a cop, your day-to-day cop. You're the generalist in most situations. Some guys come out of other units, come back to patrol. They got specialties that, they're a little more training on, a little more prepped for. But patrol's where you kind of learn all your basics. So I kind of might lump a bit of these together here because they were all essentially the same thing or the beginning of the same thing. So you had, beats I'll include in that, but you also had public safety compliance team and hospitality policing unit. I know some people are not going to like me saying that name on here. And now it's the gang suppression team. Very different names. Can you kind of talk about that leading into your current position?
Yeah. I think it was gang work was going to be the vision, or that was my vision for what my career was going to be. It was interesting. I had spent a year. I got injured. I played football for the police team, and I injured myself. I tore my ACL, and I was off for a year and 19 days in my first 5 years. So for people listening, you generally have to do 2 years within patrol before you can move anywhere and take any other roles. And generally, we'll find cops, men and women, will kind of gravitate towards specialization between 2 and 5 years. They'll just start to figure out what they want the early pursuits to do, to be, and some people will have an idea on what they want to do going forward. And so in that 2 to 5 years, I determined, I think gang work is exactly what I want to do. And in order to do gang work here within the EPS, you had to have a few things, a few specializations. So it was very favorable if you had the covert surveillance course. And you only get that course by being valuable within the division to a special project team. So it's a plainclothes unit that does a variety of investigations that are plainclothes and covert based. And so the project team was my next step and my next kind of career pursuit within the division. So that's essentially kind of your path. And at that time, when I was just becoming eligible for that application to go down the project team route in old South Division, and then it split to Southeast and Southwest, at about 5 years, everybody had to do a year or a stint either on the front desk or up in comms or down in cells, in the cell block. And everybody, they just took a rotation, and then every squad donated these people. I saw it as purgatory. It was awful. You take these cops, these men and women, and they're right at the prime of their figuring stuff out, and then they have to go inside and live in a dungeon for a year or whatever it is. And I was particularly motivated because I had spent that year and 19 days non-operational. I worked in our pawn detail at that time, helping out the pawn guys and the detectives in the back. And I had felt like I was already on the shelf for so long, and my name was about to come up for one of these kind of non-operational roles. And that was really not favorable. And I didn't want, of course I work in a paramilitary organization, so I do it, but I wanted to find a path to avoid that, to be honest. And the salvation there, the luck, as luck would have it, a whole bunch of guys from my squad and a bunch of guys that I knew in the service had gone and worked White Avenue Beats. And White Avenue Beats is, at the time, the premier kind of entertainment destination for the entire city. You go to White Avenue, and all the bars and nightclubs were existing in a 5-block strip. Mm-hmm. Then we would go north and south 1 block each direction. And so I had spent a bunch of time filling in and doing overtime up there and working the crazy. And my experience with bars and nightclubs in my pre-policing life, and before that also after I came out of school, I worked in group homes. for a period of time while I was also back here in town. And so it was a natural fit for me to be able to work up there. So right at the time when I was getting set to try and campaign for my suitability for project team, there was a horrible accident that occurred at involving one of the project teams, and the executive at the time suspended all project teams across the entire service. They nuked the project teams right when I was about to apply. And my division was the last division to get the project teams back. The operation, like as far as the numbers go, they just couldn't make it work. So it was getting later and later and later into my potential purgatory into the front desk or whatever it became, and a Beats position came available, and I applied for it. I thought, I think I will. It will be detrimental to my career to be in sales or up in comms or whatever for a period of time. So I said, okay, beats are it's good policing that happens there. I can get behind a whole bunch of the initiatives up there. My skill set was perfectly matched for it, so I applied. I got the position, and then 2 weeks after that, 2 weeks after I got the Beats position, it came and it was announced that my division was going to get a project team. And so I went back to my inspector at the time, Inspector Rocchio at the time, and I kind of made an appointment with him, and I said, okay, I am grateful for this opportunity with Beats, but my whole career path is kind of structured towards the project team and the gang and drugs, and I guess I can summarize his response as, well, yeah, I can appreciate that, and it's wonderful that you have those career goals, but you did make a commitment, and you made a commitment, and you did kind of make a commitment. You took a spot, and you committed to this. It's totally your choice if you want to pull your name from the Beat spot that you committed to for the opportunity to maybe apply to the project team, but you did make a commitment, and you made a commitment, and it's your choice.
So, yeah, but...
Yeah, I said, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. I'll look forward to working on Beats. Thank you.
So Beats is your kind of transition into through all these other units.
With Beats, I naturally fell into the role during the daytime. There's a ton of homeless youth. There's a bunch of youth serving services in the White Avenue area. So during the daytime, I was the youth guy. I was essentially the designated youth guy, the de facto youth guy. All the kids knew me, and I had a great relationship with a bunch of the homeless youth shelters and some of the outreach programs. And then during the nighttime, because of my bar experience and crowd control and managing bad guys that were trying to hurt people, I became the gang guy in the bars and nightclubs at night. And
was there any, at this time, what year would this have been?
This was 2010.
So was there anybody else doing that type of work in 2010? So this is before I got here. So correct. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, correct.
What was around at that time?
So at that time, right around the 2008, 2009, 2010 timeline, and a little bit before, the city had a rash of nightclub violence. At that time, it was centered around the Jamaican community and the Caribbean community, who have a strong presence in the nighttime scene here, and a lot of bars ended up getting shut down because they had shootings and people getting murdered all over the place, and so they couldn't adhere. Mm-hmm. The people throwing those parties couldn't adhere or wouldn't adhere to the rules, and so they started having Jamaican hall parties or reggaeton or a bunch of different types of Caribbean-inspired themed nights that ended in gunfire and a whole bunch of other stuff.
So this all kind of took place on White Ave.
This was around the entire city. This is citywide.
So when you're on Beats, how do you go from Beats doing gang type work at nights to gang suppression team?
So it just so happened that around this time, between 2007 and 2010, the city recognized both between these hall parties and this violence, and the rave scene started really picking up, and we had a bunch of really unfortunate tragic deaths due to overdose and some not being aware and alive to how to police and how to offer services to people that are taking rave drugs and dancing themselves to death over 6-8 hours. So that was the genesis of what was called the Public Safety Compliance Team at that time. The city took a look at it, and the EPS took a look at the conditions and said, how did we not see this coming? And so that was the genesis of a unit called the Public Safety Compliance Team, which was led and facilitated by an EPS sergeant. And it was a multi-denominational, multi-jurisdictional team of partner agencies. So City of Edmonton contributed members to the Public Safety Compliance Team, members of AGLC, which is our liquor control and gaming, and Edmonton Fire Services all collaboratively came together and tried to regulate and monitor the entertainment and industry and the hospitality industry at that time. And so there was one EPS person dedicated to that, and that came down to regulatory action against a bunch of bars, and honestly, relationship building with a bunch of industry stakeholders. So bar owners, managers, a whole bunch of other stuff would all be pipelined through the Public Safety Compliance Team. And right at that time, so there's, again, this universe-bending kind of confluence of factors. It just so happened at about the same time in 2008, both Vancouver and Calgary were experiencing almost identical rates of public violence. So I'll get into it a little bit later about the history of the formation of our gangs and how some of the gang violence manifests. But it just so happened at this time. Yeah, it's on the list.
Yeah, we'll get into it a bit later on that side.
Yeah, so. You bet. And so what I can say, though, is that the response from those different police agencies and those municipalities was to form dedicated units for gang suppression and to lobby for legislation that helped municipal police forces deal with the presence of gangsters who would their presence would then beget gang-related violence or gang-motivated violence. So there was a law put onto the books in Alberta in 2009. It was under Section 69.1 of the Gaming and Liquor Act. It was the gang legislation. So it essentially says, for your listeners, it essentially says gang members go to liquor license premises and they either are the targets of violence or they commit violence through no fault of their own or through the very nature of what they're participating in. And a police officer, on good faith belief that a person is a member of or a facilitator or in the company of a gang member or a gang associate, can exclude or remove that person from a liquor license premise anywhere in Alberta. And so the Calgary Police Service lobbied for that to be entered into the law went on the books. I think in 2009 it was sent forward to a constitutional lawyer and got drafted up and got put on the books. The EPS didn't immediately start enforcing that law. We wanted to see kind of the risk and liability of how to ensure we were adhering to the central tenets of the law. But regardless, at that time, the EPS decided that they were going to have a mechanism for identifying gang members that were eligible for ejection under that legislation, and then it would be sort of fanned out to police officers that were likely to encounter these gang members in liquor license premises. So it went from organized crime section. It got pipelined through the Public Safety Compliance Team at that time, who then filtered it down to the beat cops that were operating on White Avenue and Jasper Avenue and West Edmonton Mall. And we were brought into the fold to start to figure out which gang members these are and what kind of threats of public violence and intimidation that these guys would carry with them. And so I got essentially identified early on by the compliance team as, this guy, not only is he really, really tuned in and dialed in within bars and nightclubs, but my earlier interest in gang work led to this kind of perfect storm of not only do I love to hunt these gangsters and to have some sort of effect on them, but it was also within my wheelhouse and under the purview of what my daily responsibilities were, which was these bars and nightclubs in the White Avenue area. And so we enacted and acted on and enforced that legislation to a great degree of success on White Avenue, in the White Ave area, and then collaboratively across the entire service. And I got earmarked really as one of the guys who was a forerunner in terms of understanding this legislation. And it just so happened at that time that the public safety compliance team had been granted an increase in their staffing level because there was just so much work to do. There was right at that time, there was a bunch of non-compliance from venues across the city. There were shootings happening all over the place. There was emerging new places kind of all over the place. So they were staffing up, and I got approached to put in my application for the compliance team, and that was in 2012. And so my role within the compliance team was to facilitate the regulatory and relationship building kind of central tenets of the compliance team. I was also handed a portfolio essentially of this gang suppression work, this early gang suppression work, and it just took off from there. So I started to try to standardize the documentation for how we were going to
kind of identify
and select
who we're talking
individuals. So we would form a relationship with the inspector in charge of organized crime branch. I was relentless in my presence up on the third floor, and every one of the gang investigators knew me by name. I would ride along with them. I had a history of I guess organizational credibility with focusing on these gangsters anyway. I would just do it in a very different fashion. So where the vast majority of gang work that was happening in the city at that time was plainclothes and covert and source-based, I would walk right up to gangsters and say, "Hey, you're a gang member, time to go." And we would garner compliance and intelligence and sources and a whole bunch of other sort of aspects of the fundamental building blocks of organized crime investigation just by being the sheriff of my small town, being the beat cop in the know right there.
Yeah, everything has its place, right? Like there's a time for the surveillance, there's a time for doing the covert aspect, and then there's a time for, like, we want to know who this person is right now, we're going to go up and talk to them.
The overt part of it is severely underrepresented in movies and in police work in general. And we get so caught up in the habit of surveilling somebody until you figure out who they are, when it's just as meritorious and just as effective, sometimes more so, to be overt in your policing attention. It's the left hand and the right hand working together. If you got an agency that's really, really dialed in, you can use both to great effect. Where one is insufficient in the time and place, in terms of satisfying the needs, you can apply both in equal proportions or in relative proportions to what the needs are for the community. And it was something that I'm a recognizable figure. I'm a big bald billboard for anti-violence campaigns, and by that time I had my face in the media and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I wasn't delicate and I wasn't covert. There was nothing undercover about me. I was always fair and equitable in my approach. I was always professional in my communication with these guys, and I was building a reputation. It was like building a brand. You know what to expect when Ferry walks in the room versus when other gang investigators were dealing with you in seedy back alleys or wherever.
Mm-hmm. So what does that look like now so it's now called the Gang Suppression Team, and what does your job entail, and what does that kind of look like from what we're just talking about with how you interact with these guys on a day-to-day basis? We're doing the overt suppression type work, not the covert.
So, Yeah, it went through a number of iterations. We had proposed a violent crime suppression team, very much like Calgary started out. We put that paper forward in 2014, and that was right on the front end of these rising violence rates. So for a number of different factors, we were having public shooting and murders, and we were getting out of. In 2011, Edmonton was deemed Stabminton or Deadminton. We had the record high homicide rates, and we were transitioning away from people that were coming from a knife culture and moving towards a gun culture within our criminal underworld and our gangsters in particular. So we put forward this paper in 2014, and it just wasn't resourcing for it. And then 2015, December of 2014, there was a really, really public, prominent homicide at Hudson's downtown that's no longer in operation. A really prominent gang figure got shot and killed right in the front doors. And it ended up having some follow-on homicide investigations for the suspect, ended up dead out of town. So it became really, really public, and a bunch of stakeholders within the entertainment community made a ton of noise about, we need some help here. You can't regulate us into getting rid of this violence problem. So you can give me a ticket all you want. If you tell me that the worst people in Edmonton, gun-toting murderers, are trying to come to my club, and then you're telling me to keep them away, it ain't going to happen, Jack. We need help. And can you dedicate some police resources? So fundamentally, the EPS was fortunately listening to their stakeholders, and some of the experts in the field in Western Canada were saying overt is the way to go, in combination with some other efforts. And so the gang suppression team was given rise out of what was at the time Hospitality Policing Unit. Hospitality Policing Unit was essentially, you do all of the violence suppression and specifically and narrowly focus it on entertainment venues. So if it was somewhere where people could go and drink or dance or high five or whatever, there was an elevated risk to the public, and there was a necessity to police in those areas because of the population density, two, the volatility of the crowd due to alcohol intoxication or drug consumption. Three, the public facing, like the image of the city, when you had people that are going out to try and have a good time and watch Oilers games or whatever, and you had to worry about getting mowed down or whatever it became, reputationally for the city, and for the sentiment of safety and security was fairly important. So that team got staffed up in 2015, and we proved to be so effective at not only generating intelligence that would then supplement covert investigative efforts, but in and of itself, having an immediate social effect and an immediate social consequence on these gang guys was having a downstream behavioral effect on both these particular gang members, subjects of interest, but also affected their ability to recruit into their criminal networks. It affected their lives so much that we saw a change in their behavior in future years, in years after they became subjects of this gang legislation. Mm-hmm. So born out of that, in just the entertainment venues, I think a lot of people within the police service and externally from our section started to realize, not only is there an immediate value to investigative efforts. So, for example, if you had gang members that were causing problems within the community, a very typical kind of path to interrupting that gang operations would be to conduct like a drug investigation or some sort of criminal investigation the genesis would be some sort of source information or whatever it is that the police can bring to bear, and then you would surveil them and build grounds and evidence. There would be search warrants and wiretaps and a whole bunch of other stuff. But all of that takes a lot of time and
money and resources.
And while all that's happening in the background, these gangsters are still doing gangster stuff. And if somebody decides on that day at that time they're going to settle a score, or they come across their rivals, or there's somebody that has to go right now, there's rarely the ability to prevent overt acts of violence associated with gang members. And what we were doing was having both an immediate impact on their social lives, but we were also having a displacement effect as well. So a lot of our prominent gang figures just stopped going out in bars and nightclubs. And by virtue of them not being there, that was an immediate improvement to public safety, because while you might get into a bar fight because you stepped on some guy's Nikes, you weren't going to get shot in the face from somebody that had done it before, very likely had done it before, and has people willing to prove themselves and their loyalty to the gang or the criminal network or whatever. So within the gang suppression team, the EPS moved a hospitality policing unit to the gang to organized crime section in 2019, and expanded the role of what would then be the gang suppression team. So it wasn't just focused on bars and nightclubs. It was the gang suppression team was tasked with identifying prominent gang groups that were causing community harm, and we would apply overt policing tactics and suppression initiatives wherever these gang members were having an effect on the community. So whether it's a prominent nightclub or Rogers Arena or a trap house, a crack house in north side or south side Edmonton, it didn't really matter. We were able to follow wherever that gang members and their associates were going, and that had a couple of downstream effects. But in terms of mission clarity, the gang suppression team strives to generate intelligence on these groups, because really you see so much more when you physically and directly interact with these gangsters. It's one thing to surveil them, and there's a ton of value with receiving source information. There's a ton of intel that needs to be interpreted and sifted through. There's a bunch of data there. But we can also make a lot of inferences about power dynamics and loyalty and subservience, and who's got money and who's paying with cash and who's paying with credit cards, and group structure and dynamics. You can get vehicles. You can
basically
extract
expand on the whole social
so
network.
much more on the social network. That's exactly right. And so you can fill in a lot of the gaps into how these groups operate and who is likely going to be a shot caller within that group, which then leads you to some unique investigative decisions down the road. And it really fills in the picture for the courts after the fact. Whereas before, these guys could claim, what? We just know each other from school. We just happen to be in the same restaurant together at the same time. It's by happenstance. No, I saw your bill. You guys ordered, soup together, and you were drinking shots all night long, and you paid cash, and you got the girls into the cab, and you guys all left together. So it paints a better picture for prosecution after the fact, in terms of this knowledge and this familiarity within group members or group members or between members within a group.
So can you talk a bit about like the capacity of the team? So how many people we have, what we kind of work on day to day, or who we might work with, because we work with pretty much every unit under the sun, including several other police agencies. Like, people will task us with things, well, not task us, but they'll ask us for help,
assistance,
from other cities, and we interact with them on almost a daily basis.
So the EPS, on top of, in organized crime section, they've got a number of investigative units that are working different drug angles. So drug investigative teams, cannabis team, drug experts. We have one gang suppression team. It's staffed by 7 constables and myself. In a qualitative analysis of gang membership in gang activity and gang violence, we can say that there are roughly, at any given time, there's probably between 12 and 13 shooter groups at any given time. There's not one particular gang conflict that is fueling this community harm via indiscriminate shootings. There's not like one gang-controlled neighborhood that you see on the movies, like, oh, you don't want to get shot, don't go down to the projects or whatever it becomes. That's the vernacular in this kind of the social media and pop culture. What Edmonton has is depending on socioeconomic sort of origins of the group. So there are like some stereotypical down on their luck, no options other than to band together, sort of super low socioeconomic kind of gang groups and street gangs derived out of poverty and desperation and generational sort of suffering. People that have legitimately very, very few options to get themselves out of the circumstance. There's a heavy amount of gang presence and street gang presence within some of those segments of society, but they are not regulated or relegated to particular kind of geographical areas within the city. There's no like one gang controlled neighborhood for it, like where you see, oh, that group has this graffiti tag on these blocks and that's their gang controlled neighborhood. It doesn't exist here. It's not that way. And so through the use of mobility and technology, our gang groups essentially ply their trade across the entire city. And through a variety of factors, we rarely have gangsters that are loyal to one group for the rest of their lives on the high end and the low end. So on our low end, we have indigenous street gangs, indigenous-based street gangs that are super loyal to the brand. They'll get it tattooed all over their bodies, and they'll wear the clothing, and they'll get their kids to represent those different gang groups. You have those groups that are in it for life, and they identify and adopt one particular gang group. And then on the upper end, we have the outlaw motorcycle gangs and the biker gangs that are loyal in almost the exact same proportion. You get guys that go through years and years and years of that quarrying that I spoke about earlier to get on with these big clubs, and then they identify for the rest of their lives, and they represent that group. In the middle of all of that, thousands and thousands of young men, typically aged between the ages of like 17 to 34. These young men are attracted to the criminal lifestyle, enjoy the fast money and the violence and the notoriety of being involved in this seedy kind of gangsterism, I will call it. They form these criminal networks and these loose criminal associations where they will remain familiar with each other and in business with each other, depending on their availability and their resources, throughout their early adulthood. And at any given time, they can switch allegiances and sell each other out, or they will pirate on each other's drug lines and gang. There is so much volatility within our gang landscape.
So with that though, like, so you're saying there's thousands of gang members in Edmonton at any given time. When you go right from the street level all the way through full on organized crime, there could be 1,000 plus people somewhere involved, either full members, associates, still maybe doing something on the periphery, aiding and abetting type.
That's correct.
Helping them out, giving them a place to crash while they're doing their dirt. But that's for 7 constables and a sergeant.
That's correct. And so when you talk about scope, we've conducted some quantitative analysis in terms of what the challenges are in front of us. At any given time, there's between 2,000 and 3,000 individuals that are involved in what we would consider gang crime across the city, and that's primarily focused on Edmonton, but it's also it really is the greater Edmonton area. And so understand geographically, Edmonton's a bit unique in that we have a population just under 1 million proper, I think, in the last census. But the bedroom communities are all within like 15 minutes drive of Edmonton. The proximity to Edmonton and the likelihood that people are traveling and commuting into Edmonton is disproportionately high in comparison to, say, Calgary, with some of their bedroom communities, which are a little bit further out. The greater Edmonton area bumps our population base up to about 1.3 million in comparison to what we're funded for as far as policing goes.
We're also the hub for Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray.
Correct.
The territories, even out into Prince George. We know some of the guys that we deal with and that we talk to. This is the hub to drive through, fly through, bring everything here, and then it goes on to bigger and better places, I guess.
Correct. And then when you factor in the prison population around Edmonton, and we have the max and the remand, and we have in the exiting prison programs as well, a lot of gang affiliated individuals, either they became gang affiliated on the inside or are transitioning through the judicial system, the penal system. They end up coming out without a whole lot of prospects, and so the gang involved individuals are probably around 3,000. And 7 constables, even within the broader structure of the organized crime branch, which has a number of investigative units, and Alert. It bears mentioning that Alert Alberta has, I think, 5 Alert teams. The EPS contributes a significant amount of resources towards Alert, and Alert really investigates more sophisticated, more advanced, more serious kind of organized crime files, and they have a ton of success in doing so. But the overt stuff isn't happening at anywhere other than the gang suppression team and a bunch of street cops who also essentially come from the same roots that you and I come from. Is we're going to focus on bad guys doing bad guy things to people.
So I'm going to pause you there. We got a few more things to talk about, but we're going to have to do that in a second episode. So we're going to get into like the whole history of gangs, the violence here in the city, some of the current trends, some of the groups involved in this stuff. And then we'll talk a little bit about the gang intervention strategies, some of the stuff that you teach on now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Professor Ferry. Okay, so thanks for joining me for this episode, and we'll have you back here shortly.
You bet.
Okay.